rifle cracks across a silent field, and a man drops before anyone sees the shooter. Miles away, Christian Wolff sits beneath harsh office lights, sorting tax records as if numbers are the only language he trusts. To the world, he is a quiet accountant with stiff manners and no friends. But hidden passports, weapons, and stacks of cash reveal another life. Christian follows money for criminals, warlords, and people who kill to protect their secrets. Then a robotics company hires him to investigate millions that vanished from its books. A nervous analyst, Dana, found the first clue. Before Christian can trace it, someone starts murdering everyone connected to the theft. And one question matters. Who will reach Dana first? Dana is still at her desk when the building begins to empty. Fluorescent lights hum above her. Computer screens blink in the darkening office, each one filled with columns she can no longer trust. She tries to convince herself that Christian's questions were routine, that the missing money is only an accounting error. But Christian never looked confused. He looked disturbed. That is worse. Because men like him do not fear numbers. They fear what those numbers are hiding. Christian works through the night, writing equations across glass walls until the office around him disappears beneath calculations. Every transaction connects to another. False invoices, inflated purchases, money leaving one account and quietly returning through another. It is not random theft. It is a machine designed to drain the company without killing it. Someone has been stealing for years, taking small amounts at first, then millions. Christian follows the trail deeper and finds the impossible total, $61 million. Dana stares at the figure, breath trapped in her throat. She thought she had discovered a minor discrepancy. Instead, she opened a door into something enormous. Christian tells her the money was moved using an old method: take company funds, hide them, then secretly put some back to create the illusion of explosive growth. Investors see success. Share prices climb. The thief becomes richer without anyone realizing the company's success was manufactured. For the first time, Dana sees something shift behind Christian's expression. Not excitement. Recognition. Whoever built this system thinks like he does. Before they can identify the person responsible, the company's chief financial officer, Ed Chilton, receives a visitor at his home. The visitor speaks softly, almost politely, while Ed's wife sleeps upstairs. A pistol rests on the table between them. Ed is given a choice that is not really a choice: swallow an overdose and make his death look natural, or watch his wife die first. His fingers shake as he lifts the pills. The glass taps against his teeth. Minutes later, his body lies motionless on the bathroom floor. Morning arrives with bad news and colder faces. Lamar Blackburn, the company's founder, calls Christian into his office. Ed is dead, and the investigation is over. Lamar claims the board cannot endure more chaos. He thanks Christian for his work, pays him, and tells him to leave. Christian does not move. Stopping before the answer feels physically wrong to him. His jaw tightens. His fingers twitch against his leg. Numbers are supposed to balance. Patterns are supposed to end. But this pattern has been ripped away from him just as the final pieces were forming. Lamar repeats the order. Christian finally walks out, carrying his files, while every instinct inside him screams that the cancellation is not protection. It is containment. Across the city, Treasury analyst Marybeth Medina studies photographs of criminals, assassins, and missing men. Her superior, Ray King, has given her one task: identify the mysterious accountant appearing in the background of international crime scenes. No clear face, no real name. Only fragments, a blurred photograph, coded financial records, and reports of a man who can calculate fortunes while armed guards stand nearby. Ray knows Medina has a troubled past, and he uses it to keep pressure on her. Find the accountant, or lose everything she rebuilt. She notices something others missed. The same man appears near some of the world's most dangerous organizations, yet he is never treated like a prisoner. He is invited in, trusted, paid. Then he disappears before governments arrive. Medina begins tracing aliases, but every name leads to a dead end. Whoever he has spent years erasing himself. Christian returns home, but routine cannot silence the unfinished calculation. He prepares dinner with exact movements. One plate, one fork. Food separated perfectly. Then the phone rings. Dana's voice is thin and rushed. Someone has been inside her apartment. A drawer stands open. Nothing valuable is missing, yet objects have shifted by inches. Her laptop feels warm. She hears movement in the hallway and freezes. Christian tells her to lock the door, move away from the windows, and stay silent. Then the line goes dead. Christian is already moving. He opens a hidden cabinet and removes a handgun, suppressor, and body armor with the calm speed of someone who has done this many times. His face becomes empty, focused. He drives through the city while two armed men enter Dana's building. Dana backs into her bedroom, gripping a kitchen knife she knows will not save her. Footsteps stop outside. The doorknob turns slowly. One man steps inside. A suppressed gunshot punches through the silence. He collapses before he can raise his weapon. Christian appears behind him, eyes fixed on the second attacker advancing down the hall. 3 shots, fast, precise. The attacker crashes into the wall. Dana stares at Christian, unable to connect the awkward accountant from the office with the man standing over 2 bodies. Christian looks toward the open doorway. More footsteps are coming. Christian fires before the third man reaches the doorway. The bullet tears through the attacker's shoulder, spinning him into the wall. Another shadow moves behind him. Christian steps forward, calm as a metronome. 1 shot, then another. The hallway falls silent except for Dana's breathing. She cannot stop staring. At the office, Christian struggled to make eye contact. He missed jokes, spoke too directly, and seemed uncomfortable whenever anyone stood too close. Here, surrounded by bodies, every movement is effortless. He checks the weapons, searches the dead men's pockets, then pulls Dana to her feet. "We have to go." No explanation. No comfort. Just certainty. They leave through the rear stairwell before police sirens reach the block. Dana follows because fear has emptied her of every other choice. In Christian's truck, she finally asks who he is. His hands stay fixed on the wheel. An accountant? Dana lets out a breath that almost becomes a laugh. Then she notices blood across his sleeve. Not his blood. Christian drives them to a storage facility hidden behind rows of industrial buildings. Inside one unit sits a polished silver trailer, clean enough to feel untouched by the outside world. Dana expects weapons. She finds them. Rifles mounted behind panels, passports under false names, bundles of cash, gold bars. But the strangest objects are the paintings. Original masterpieces hang in narrow compartments, works worth more than most people will earn in a lifetime. Christian treats them like ordinary possessions. Dana studies him, trying to understand why a man who owns millions lives alone above a small accounting office and eats the same quiet dinner every night. Because wealth is not what he wants. Control is. His entire life has been built to keep chaos outside the walls. Years earlier, when Christian was a child, even small changes could crush him. A missing puzzle piece, a flickering light, the scrape of a spoon against a plate. Sounds grew sharp enough to hurt. Touch felt like pressure against exposed skin. At a neurological clinic, his mother watched him collapse beneath the noise while another child tried to calm him. The doctors offered structure and specialized care. Christian's father refused. He was a military man who believed the world would never protect his son. So Christian would have to become stronger than the world. Training began early. His father exposed him to bright lights, loud music, pain, exhaustion. He forced Christian and his younger brother to fight larger boys. When Christian fell, his father ordered him back up. Again, again, again. His brother always stood beside him. 2 boys against everyone. That memory still follows Christian, even though the brother is gone from his life now. Dana sees only pieces of the damage, the rigid routines. The way Christian rubs his fingers together when overwhelmed. The heavy metal music he plays while pressing a wooden rod against his leg, forcing himself through controlled sensory pain. She watches from the trailer doorway, shaken by the violence of it. Christian stops the music. Silence. He looks embarrassed, almost vulnerable. For a moment, the killer disappears, leaving only the boy who learned that pain was something to master before it mastered him. Dana does not step away. That matters more than she realizes. Across town, Mary Beth Medina finally finds a pattern in Christian's false identities. Each alias shares something subtle, names of famous mathematicians. She cross-references tax records, property purchases, and international crime reports until the pieces begin pointing toward one man. Then Ray King enters the room and closes the door. He has been waiting for her to reach this moment. Ray admits that years ago, while investigating the Gambino crime family, he walked into a restaurant after a massacre. Bodies covered the floor. At the center stood a young man with a rifle, Christian Wolff. Ray expected to die. Instead, Christian asked whether Ray had been a good father. Ray answered honestly, "Not always." But he wanted another chance. Christian let him live. Since then, Ray has quietly received anonymous tips exposing terrorists, traffickers, and criminal organizations. The mysterious accountant was not only serving dangerous people, sometimes he was destroying them. Now Ray is nearing retirement, and Medina was never chosen merely to capture Christian. She was chosen to replace Ray. Back in the trailer, Christian contacts the unseen woman who manages his jobs through a computerized voice. He asks who sent the killers. The answer arrives through financial transfers, shell companies, and security contracts. The trail leads back to Living Robotics. Dana's face loses its color. Someone inside the company ordered the murders, shut down the audit, and killed Ed Chilton. Christian begins packing weapons. Dana asks what he plans to do. He slides a magazine into his rifle. Finish the audit. But somewhere else, the man leading the assassins receives Christian's name, and when he sees the photograph, his expression changes. Not fear. Recognition. The assassin studies Christian's photograph until the room around him seems to disappear. The scar near the eyebrow. The rigid posture. The eyes that never quite meet the camera. He knows those eyes. For years, Braxton has carried memories of a brother who vanished after their father's death. A brother who could calculate impossible equations in seconds, yet could not explain why he left without saying goodbye. Braxton built his own life inside violence, selling military skill to anyone rich enough to pay. But this contract suddenly feels different. The target is no stranger. It is Chris. Christian does not know who is waiting for him. He only knows that the killers are connected to Lamar Blackburn and that Dana will never be safe while the man responsible remains alive. He leaves Dana at the trailer with money, passports, and instructions to disappear if he does not return. She refuses at first. Her voice breaks as she asks whether he always solves problems by walking toward gunfire. Christian pauses. "No. A beat. Sometimes I use accounting. It is almost a joke." Almost. Then he drives away. Lamar's mansion rises behind stone walls and armed guards. Inside, Lamar walks through polished rooms, pretending control still belongs to him. His sister, Rita, has discovered enough to understand the truth. The missing $61 million was never stolen from Living Robotics by an outsider. Lamar took it himself, then fed portions back into the company. Artificial revenue created artificial growth. Investors saw a miracle. Lamar saw a future public offering worth billions. Ed Chilton found out. Dana came too close. Christian came closer. Lamar insists it was necessary. The company builds prosthetic limbs for wounded children and injured soldiers. He tells himself the fraud created jobs, saved lives, and protected innovation. But every noble sentence ends beneath the same truth. People died to preserve his fortune. Rita cannot accept it. She reaches for the phone. Braxton enters before she can call anyone. He stands across from her with a weapon lowered at his side. For one moment, he hesitates. Killing armed men is easy. Killing a frightened woman who knows the wrong secret is something else. Rita sees the conflict in his face and understands that mercy is possible. Then Lamar gives the order. The shot echoes through the house. Outside, Christian cuts the power. Darkness swallows the grounds. Security lights die. Cameras blink out. The guards lift their rifles, suddenly blind. Christian moves through them without hesitation. A suppressed shot from the trees. A body drops beside the fountain. Another guard turns toward the sound, but Christian is already behind him. Fast, exact, unforgiving. Inside the mansion, Braxton's team closes around the entrances. They are trained professionals, but Christian does not fight like a normal attacker. He predicts movement, counts ammunition, uses angles before his enemies know they exist. Every hallway becomes an equation, and every armed man becomes a variable he removes. Braxton hears the gunfire growing closer. One shot. Two. Silence. He knows that rhythm. Their father drilled it into both boys until bruises covered their arms. Control the breath. Ignore the pain. Finish the threat. Braxton orders the remaining men back, but Christian breaches the room before they can reposition. Bullets tear through furniture. Glass rains across the floor. Christian advances until his rifle clicks empty. A soldier rushes him. Christian breaks the man's arm, drives him into the wall, then turns as Braxton charges from the shadows. They collide. The fight is brutal and strangely familiar. Each block meets the same counter. Each strike is anticipated. They were taught by the same hands, punished by the same voice, shaped by the same childhood. Christian drives Braxton backward. Braxton tears away Christian's mask. Both men freeze. Chris? The name lands harder than any bullet. Christian's fists lower. His face, empty through the entire assault, suddenly cracks. Standing before him is the younger brother who protected him when the world became too loud. The boy who fought beside him. The only person who never treated him like something broken. Braxton laughs once, but grief catches inside it. Then he strikes Christian in the chest. You left. Christian does not defend himself. Braxton hits him again. You disappeared. Years of anger pour out between them, over their father, their mother, and the funeral where Christian never arrived. Christian finally admits he was there, hidden at the edge of the cemetery, unable to step closer. He watched Braxton bury their father alone. The brothers stand surrounded by bodies, both realizing the enemy they were hired to kill is the person they spent years missing. Then Lamar's voice comes through the doorway. He raises a gun toward Christian, and Braxton must decide which brother he is now, the one bound by blood or the one paid to pull the trigger. Braxton moves before Lamar can fire. He slams the gun aside, and the bullet tears into the ceiling. Christian reacts instantly. He pulls Braxton behind a marble column as the remaining guards flood the corridor. For one suspended second, the brothers crouch shoulder to shoulder, exactly as they did when they were children facing older boys in a filthy alley. Different walls, different weapons, same instinct, protect each other. Braxton looks at Christian and gives a breathless laugh. You always did know how to ruin a job. Christian checks his magazine. You were going to kill me. I didn't know it was you. That does not improve the job. Gunfire erupts. Marble explodes beside their heads. The brothers separate without needing a plan. Braxton rushes left, drawing the guards toward him, while Christian moves right through a side passage. Their childhood training returns like muscle memory. One creates pressure. The other finds the opening. Braxton fires from behind a staircase, forcing two men into cover. Christian appears above them and drops both before they understand they have been trapped. Lamar retreats upstairs. His polished confidence is gone now. His hands tremble as he locks himself inside his office and reaches for another weapon hidden beneath the desk. Downstairs, the mansion becomes a storm of muzzle flashes and breaking glass. Men shout into radios. Answers never come. Christian advances through the smoke. He does not rush. He counts. 3 guards near the east hall. 2 magazines between them. 1 blind corner. He fires through the wall before the first man steps out. Braxton finishes the second. The third throws down his weapon and raises both hands. Braxton lets him run. Christian watches the man disappear. You let him go. He quit. He may return. He won't. Christian considers this, then nods. It is the closest thing to trust they have shared in years, but the reunion cannot erase everything between them. As they climb toward Lamar's office, Braxton asks why Christian never called. Christian answers with silence. Braxton presses harder. Their father died believing both sons would remain together, yet Christian vanished into aliases, criminal accounts, and secret jobs. Christian's breathing changes. The lights buzz above them. Smoke burns his throat. Too many sounds overlap. The alarm, gunshots outside Braxton's voice, the ringing buried deep inside his skull. His fingers begin rubbing together. Once, twice, faster. Braxton sees it. The anger drains from his face. He remembers sitting beside Christian as a child, squeezing his hand when the world became unbearable. He remembers promising that no matter how loud things became, Chris would never face them alone. Braxton lowers his voice. I'm here. 3 words. Christian's hand stops shaking. At the top of the stairs, another guard charges from behind a door. Christian disarms him, but before he can fire, Braxton knocks the weapon away and drives the man unconscious. No more bodies than necessary, Braxton says. Christian looks down at the fallen guard. That is not how your profession usually works. Braxton almost smiles. Maybe I'm reconsidering my profession. They reach Lamar's office. Behind the locked door, Lamar calls out that everything he did was for the company. Living Robotics was failing. Investors were leaving. The medical technology would have disappeared unless he created the appearance of growth. The stolen money was returned. The company survived. Children walked because of him. Soldiers received new limbs because of him. Braxton listens. Christian does not. Numbers do not become innocent because someone wraps them in a noble story. Ed Chilton is dead. Rita is dead. Dana nearly died in her own bedroom. Every body downstairs is part of the same balance sheet. Christian places a small explosive charge against the lock. Braxton catches his arm. "You sure?" Christian looks at him. Beneath the blood, smoke, and years of distance, Braxton sees the answer clearly. Christian is not doing this because a client paid him. He is doing it because someone frightened Dana, murdered innocent people, and believed wealth could erase the cost. The charge detonates. The door bursts inward. Lamar stands behind his desk with a pistol aimed at Christian. His face is wet with sweat. Papers drift through the smoky air like pale feathers. He begins speaking rapidly, explaining that Dana can be paid, that Christian can be paid, that the company will change the world. Christian walks closer. Lamar's finger tightens on the trigger. Braxton raises his weapon. But Christian is already inside Lamar's line of fire. One wrong move, and the brother he has just found will disappear again. Lamar shifts his aim toward Braxton. Christian stops. The room becomes perfectly still. Then his eyes move to the financial report lying open on the desk. One final detail sits inside the figures, a transfer large enough to prove Lamar was not acting alone. Someone else helped build the fraud. Someone with access to every account and enough power to erase the evidence. Christian looks back at Lamar. "Who is the other partner?" Lamar smiles. And downstairs, Dana's phone begins ringing from an unknown number. Dana stares at the unknown number vibrating across the trailer table. Every instinct tells her not to answer. Then the screen displays a message beneath it. "Christian needs you to listen." She accepts the call. A woman's computerized voice speaks through the darkness, calm and precise. She tells Dana to open Christian's laptop and follow a sequence of encrypted files. Dana obeys, hands trembling over the keys. Bank transfers unfold across the screen, connecting Lamar's accounts to private security firms, debt executives, and the men who attacked her apartment. But there is no second partner. The final transfer is a trap, a reserve account Lamar created to make anyone investigating him believe the conspiracy reached beyond the company. One more false trail, one more layer of protection. Dana whispers the truth into the phone. At the mansion, Christian's earpiece activates. Lamar acted alone. The smile vanishes from Lamar's face. Christian understands immediately. Lamar was buying time, hoping the brothers would turn their attention toward an imaginary enemy. Braxton sees the realization in Christian's eyes and raises his weapon. Lamar fires first. The shot strikes Braxton high in the shoulder, throwing him backward. Christian moves. One step. One bullet. Lamar collapses behind the desk before the echo fades. Silence. Christian kneels beside Braxton, pressing his hand against the wound. Blood pushes between his fingers. Braxton's face tightens, but he forces out a laugh. Still terrible at family reunions. Christian does not respond. His breathing is too fast. He searches the wound, checks the exit point, calculates blood loss and distance to medical help. Numbers race through his mind, but this time they offer no comfort. His brother is bleeding beneath his hands, and no equation can promise that he will survive. Braxton grips Christian's wrist. "I'm not dying. You cannot know that. I know you." Outside, surviving guards flee into the night. Sirens rise in the distance. Christian lifts Braxton and guides him down the staircase, moving past the destruction they created together. At the entrance, Braxton stops. Years of anger still stand between them. Their father's funeral, the unanswered calls, the empty spaces where a brother should have been. None of it disappears because they fought on the same side for one night. Braxton looks toward the waiting vehicle. "Call me next time." Christian's eyes drop. Braxton waits. Finally, Christian gives a small nod. It is not an apology. Not yet, but it is a door left open. He places Braxton in the care of the arriving emergency team, then disappears before police surround the estate. By morning, Living Robotics is collapsing beneath the truth. Financial records are delivered anonymously to federal investigators. Lamar's fraud, the murders, and the security contracts become impossible to bury. Dana watches the news from a motel room while exhaustion pulls at her eyes. Christian sits across from her, cleaning blood from his hands. She asks about Braxton. He will recover. The answer is flat, but Christian has checked his phone 6 times in 10 minutes. Dana notices. She also notices something else. Christian saved her when walking away would have been easier. He returned to the company without payment. He risked his life for people he barely knew. The man sitting before her may work for criminals, but the coldness around him is not emptiness. It is armor. Dana asks who the woman on the phone was. Christian says nothing. Far away, inside the Neurological Institute where he once lived as a child, a young woman named Justine sits before a wall of computer screens. She cannot speak with her natural voice, and her body allows only limited movement, but her mind moves through global financial systems with astonishing speed. She has been Christian's unseen partner for years, choosing clients, monitoring threats, and guiding him through a world that once overwhelmed them both. The computerized voice was hers. At the Treasury Department, Mary Beth Medina receives a package containing every document needed to expose Lamar's crimes. Ray King recognizes Christian's method. A guilty person delivered neatly into government hands. Another balance corrected. Ray clears his desk and places his old files in front of Medina. This is yours now. She understands the real assignment. She is not supposed to arrest Christian. She is supposed to watch the trail he leaves behind and decide what to do with the monsters he uncovers. Christian prepares to leave Dana before sunrise. She wants to ask whether she will ever see him again, but the words feel too heavy. Instead, she thanks him. He pauses at the door. Human connection has always been harder for him than gunfire. He can predict the path of a bullet. He cannot predict what goodbye is supposed to feel like. So he simply says her name, Dana. Then he leaves. Days later, a large package arrives at her apartment. Inside is the painting she admired in Christian's trailer, an original Jackson Pollock worth millions. Dana stands frozen before it. Hidden beneath the frame is a phone number. And for the first time, Christian has left someone a way to find him. Dana studies the package until morning light creeps across her apartment floor. The number beneath the frame is not an ordinary phone number. It belongs to one of Christian's coded accounts. A quiet assurance that she will never have to fear the men behind Living Robotics again. But when she lifts the cheap painting from its wrapping, confusion replaces relief. It is dogs playing poker. The ridiculous picture she once told Christian she liked. She laughs despite herself. Then the frame shifts in her hands, revealing another canvas hidden behind it. The Jackson Pollock. The painting from Christian's trailer. Wild lines, violent colors, chaos that somehow becomes beautiful when seen as a whole. Dana's smile disappears. She knows what it is worth, but the money is not what leaves her speechless. Christian gave away one of the few objects he allowed close to him. For a man who struggles to say goodbye, this is the loudest thing he could have said. At the Treasury Department, Mary Beth Medina opens the files Christian sent her. Every figure is documented. Every shell company leads to a name. Lamar's crimes can no longer hide behind charity speeches or promises of medical progress. The government will call it evidence. Ray King understands it as something else. A message. Christian knows they found him. He knows Medina can follow his aliases, his clients, even the donations sent to the Neurological Institute. Yet he leaves the trail open. Not enough to surrender, just enough to establish trust. Ray places his badge on the desk. His career began with the belief that justice meant catching every criminal. Christian forced him to confront a harder truth. Some monsters wear expensive suits, employ private armies, and remain protected by laws they know how to manipulate. Christian moves through that darkness using methods Ray cannot approve of, delivering people the system might never reach. Now Medina must decide where the line belongs. At the Harbor Neuroscience Institute, Justine watches the investigation unfold across several screens. Years ago, she was the frightened girl who completed Christian's unfinished puzzle when no one else could reach him. He never forgot. Their minds understood patterns others missed, and together they built a system that connected dangerous clients, hidden money, and government informants across the world. A new request appears on her monitor. Another company. Another financial trail. Another secret powerful people are willing to kill to protect. Justine's fingers move against the controls. Her synthesized voice travels through the encrypted line. Christian receives the message while driving along an empty country road, his silver trailer rolling behind him. The road stretches toward the horizon beneath a pale sky. No guards, no alarms. Only tires against asphalt and the controlled rhythm of his breathing. His phone rings. Braxton. Christian watches the screen through two full vibrations before answering. For several seconds, neither brother speaks. Braxton is recovering, though his shoulder will carry another scar. His voice is rough when he asks whether Christian plans to disappear for another 10 years. No, Christian says. Braxton waits for more. None comes. Still, he understands. Christian did not hang up. That alone is different. Braxton tells him they should meet when he returns. No weapons, no contracts. Maybe dinner. Christian asks what time. Braxton laughs because of course that is the detail his brother needs. 7. 7 is acceptable. The call ends, but Christian does not immediately place the phone down. His thumb rests against the dark screen. Their childhood cannot be repaired by one conversation. Their father's cruelty cannot be rewritten as love simply because he believed he was preparing them for the world. Their mother's absence still hurts. The funeral still happened. Years were lost, but not all the years. Christian drives on. Beside him rests the black notebook containing his next assignment. Numbers wait inside, clean, dependable, and incapable of lying once someone knows how to read them. Yet Dana's face enters his thoughts. Then Braxton's voice. Then the memory of Justine reaching across a table to return the missing puzzle piece. For most of his life, Christian believed control meant needing nothing from anyone. Every routine, every weapon, every hidden account existed to make him untouchable. But isolation is not the same as safety. The trailer follows him through the sunlight, carrying weapons, cash, forged identities, and empty spaces where the Pollock once hung. Behind him, Dana now holds a piece of his world. Ahead, his brother is waiting. Christian tightens his hands around the wheel. The numbers balance. This time, perhaps the rest of his life can too. Gavin O'Connor has always been less interested in winning than in what winning costs. Miracle may wear the uniform of an inspirational sports film, and Warrior may build toward a mixed martial arts showdown. But both movies are really about damaged men trying to communicate through the only language they trust: discipline, endurance, and physical pain. The Accountant simply replaces the hockey rink and fighting cage with spreadsheets, sniper rifles, and criminal ledgers. The surface changes. The emotional obsession does not. Once again, O'Connor studies a man whose extraordinary competence hides an almost complete inability to live comfortably inside his own life. That contradiction fits O'Connor perfectly. Before becoming a filmmaker, he played college football at the University of Pennsylvania while privately feeding an artistic hunger through foreign films and early screenwriting. Athlete on the outside. Artist underneath. Sound familiar? Christian Wolff is built from a similar collision. A quiet accountant whose controlled posture conceals frightening physical power. O'Connor's personal history does not make him Christian, of course, but it helps explain why he understood the character's divided identity. He knows what it feels like when the person the world sees and the person living beneath that image seem to occupy different rooms. The project reached him as an unusual, commercially risky screenplay by Bill Dubuque. O'Connor later recalled that the script was not firmly established at a studio when Ben Affleck's agent contacted him and suggested Affleck for the central role. His first response was surprise. Affleck was already juggling directing commitments and blockbuster obligations, yet the possibility immediately changed the project's gravity. An autistic forensic accountant who works for criminal organizations and kills with military efficiency could easily have become a tasteless gimmick. Attach a major star, however, and that strange premise begins to look less like an industry liability and more like the foundation of a new kind of action hero. O'Connor approached that foundation with almost obsessive preparation. His filmmaking philosophy is simple. The movie must be made before filming begins. By that he means the director has to understand the intention of every scene, the emotional destination of every character, and the larger idea holding the production together before the first camera turns. That discipline is visible throughout The Accountant. The plot may become crowded, but the direction rarely feels careless. Christian's routines, the clinical violence, and the controlled visual atmosphere all appear to emerge from the same governing principle. This is a world organized according to one man's need for order. The most delicate challenge was Christian's autism. O'Connor and Affleck spent extensive time meeting men across the autism spectrum, studying different behaviors rather than copying one individual. Christian became a composite. That decision gave the filmmakers room to construct a specific fictional character, though it also created a serious responsibility. The film could not pretend that one man represented every autistic person. The final portrayal remains open to criticism, especially when autism is placed beside lethal skill and near superhuman calculation. Yet O'Connor's central intention feels sincere. He wanted Christian's differences to be part of his humanity, not a defect waiting to be cured. Here is where O'Connor makes the movie stranger and more interesting than its advertising suggested. He does not direct it as pure action. He allows procedural mystery, family melodrama, dry comedy, and character study to fight for space inside the same frame. Anna Kendrick was cast partly to introduce warmth and humor, while Affleck was encouraged to search for comedy within Christian's literal reactions and uncomfortable social exchanges. Those moments matter. Without them, Christian risks becoming a machine who calculates numbers and body counts with equal indifference. The humor creates tiny openings in the armor. Brief ones, but enough to remind us that emotional connection is still possible. O'Connor and Affleck also discovered that they shared a working-class sensibility and similar artistic taste. That compatibility gave the director a performer willing to submit to research, restraint, and repetition rather than chase easy sentiment. Behind them stood producers Mark Williams and Lynette Howell-Taylor, with Electric City Entertainment and Zero Gravity Management among the companies supporting the production, while Warner Brothers handled the theatrical release. It was studio filmmaking, but not anonymous studio filmmaking. O'Connor's fingerprints remain everywhere: bruised masculinity, complicated fathers, estranged brothers, and men who can survive violence more easily than intimacy. That is the real creative genesis of The Accountant. Not the catchy idea of a mathematician with a rifle, but O'Connor's recognition that the premise could carry an emotional wound. Christian can detect a missing number across years of financial records, yet he struggles to interpret the person standing directly in front of him, precise with systems, lost with people. The director built the film around that tension, but vision alone cannot explain how its mysteries, flashbacks, and intersecting investigations were assembled. For that, we have to open Bill Dubuque's screenplay and examine the blueprint beneath the calculations. Before Christian Wolff reached the screen, he existed inside one of those scripts Hollywood admires precisely because nobody knows how to sell it. Bill Dubuque's screenplay appeared on the 2011 Blacklist, receiving 13 votes from industry executives who considered it one of the year's strongest unproduced scripts. The central description was already there. The Treasury Department pursues a brilliant autistic accountant who also operates as an assassin. Accounting, autism, government investigation, family trauma, gunplay. On paper, these ingredients should cancel each other out. Instead, their collision became the story's identity. The initial idea came from producer Mark Williams, but Dubuque developed it into the screenplay and constructed Christian as more than a clever occupational joke. Calling the hero an accountant gives the story its central metaphor. Christian survives by finding imbalance. Missing money, repeated numbers, and corrupted records disturb him because they violate an order he believes must exist. His professional gift is therefore inseparable from his emotional condition. He can repair a ledger because human relationships cannot be repaired so cleanly. Numbers confess eventually. People hide, retreat, and lie. That tension gives the film considerably more weight than a conventional assassin thriller. Dubuque structures the narrative as several investigations unfolding at once. Christian examines the finances of Living Robotics after junior accountant Dana Cummings discovers a discrepancy. Treasury analyst Mary Beth Medina investigates Christian under pressure from director Ray King. Flashbacks investigate Christian's childhood, revealing how his father responded to his diagnosis and how his brother became entangled in that upbringing. Meanwhile, an unidentified mercenary eliminates anyone connected to the financial conspiracy. Each thread asks the same basic question: who is Christian Wolff? The problem is that the screenplay keeps delaying the answer until identity itself becomes a collection of twists. That design creates genuine momentum. Christian's work at Living Robotics could have been painfully static. One man covering walls with figures is hardly an obvious thriller sequence, but Dubuque turns calculation into detective action. Christian writes across glass, mutters through patterns, and refuses to stop until the numbers balance. The missing money becomes the equivalent of a body at the beginning of a murder mystery. Dana is the witness who spotted something impossible. Christian is the investigator who cannot leave the contradiction alone. The writing makes intelligence active. His mind does not merely provide exposition, it pushes the plot into dangerous territory. The screenplay is equally clever in the way it withholds information through parallel storytelling. We see Christian's childhood without immediately understanding where his brother went. We follow the mercenary leader without being told why his reactions to Christian feel strangely personal. Ray King appears to be hunting Christian, only for the story to reveal a relationship built on debt, fear, and reluctant cooperation. These are not random surprises. Dubuque plants them as incomplete equations, giving the audience enough information to sense a pattern while denying the final number. When the answers arrive, earlier scenes rearrange themselves in the viewer's memory. But here is the catch. Nearly every relationship becomes a revelation. The mercenary is Christian's brother. Justine, introduced during the childhood material, is the adult voice communicating through Christian's assistant. Ray King's pursuit conceals his history with Christian. Lamar Blackburn's respectable public image hides the financial conspiracy. The screenplay becomes so committed to concealment that characters occasionally feel less like people than locked boxes waiting for the third act. The construction is undeniably ambitious. It is also crowded, and the film's lengthy explanatory scenes expose how much narrative machinery Dubuque has placed behind the walls. Christian and Dana provide the script's necessary breathing space. Their conversations are built around similarity, rather than a conventional opposites attract romance. Dana understands numbers, speaks too quickly when nervous, and admits that social situations do not come naturally to her. She does not fully understand Christian, but she recognizes the comfort of systems. Their hotel room sequence works because the screenplay briefly stops treating Christian as a mystery. He shares information. He listens. He makes an awkward joke. Nothing explodes. Yet the stakes feel high because emotional exposure is more dangerous to him than armed confrontation. The dialogue follows that same principle. Christian speaks literally and economically, forcing other characters to adjust to his rhythm. Dana fills silences because silence makes her uncomfortable. Braxton speaks with aggression and humor, turning buried hurt into performance. Ray King delivers the screenplay's largest block of exposition, but even that speech is framed as confession. A government official explaining how one encounter with Christian permanently altered his life. Dubuque's dialogue is strongest when characters talk around emotion. The brothers can discuss violence easily. Abandonment is harder. That imbalance tells us who they are before either man admits what he feels. Detailed draft-by-draft revisions have not been widely documented, so claims about abandoned endings or major rewritten subplots would be speculation. What survives on screen, however, shows a writer attempting something far riskier than a simple action vehicle. Dubuque combines a forensic mystery with a fractured family drama, then hides both inside the silhouette of a professional killer. The screenplay does not balance every element perfectly. Sometimes the equations overwhelm the people, yet its central creation is strong enough to survive the congestion, and finding the actor capable of embodying that creation would become the production's next crucial calculation. The role of Christian Wolff did not always belong to Ben Affleck. Will Smith had previously been attached to the project, which tells us how Hollywood initially viewed The Accountant, an unconventional premise requiring an unmistakable movie star at its center. Smith would have brought speed, charm, and emotional openness. Affleck brought something colder. He looks like a conventional action hero, yet his screen presence can become distant, guarded, and almost unreadable. For Christian, that distance was not a limitation. It was the key. Casting Affleck shifted the character away from charismatic assassin territory and toward something more internally sealed. Affleck entered negotiations in October 2014 during a period when his public image was undergoing another transformation. He was promoting Gone Girl, finishing Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and preparing to direct Live by Night. Warner Brothers already had a strong relationship with him, but familiarity alone did not make the choice effective. Christian required a performer who could look physically dangerous without constantly advertising danger. Affleck's size does half the work. The stillness does the rest. When Christian stands silently in an ordinary office, the film does not need to tell us he is capable of violence. His body seems compressed, as though every movement has been measured before it occurs. Gavin O'Connor has explained that once Affleck responded to Bill Dubuque's screenplay, the project suddenly became easy to package. Director, star, producers, and script were assembled before the material returned to Warner Brothers, giving the studio a complete proposition rather than another uncertain development project. Affleck also understood the boundary between acting and directing. O'Connor recalled establishing immediately that he would direct while Affleck would perform, and Affleck respected that division. For a filmmaker handling several timelines, tonal shifts, and a sensitive central portrayal, that lack of ego mattered. The production needed concentration, not two directors quietly fighting over the steering wheel. Nicole Abellera served as casting director, and the ensemble constructed around Affleck works through carefully controlled opposition. Anna Kendrick was pursued for Dana Cummings, while J.K. Simmons entered discussions for Ray King in November 2014. Both actors had appeared in Up in the Air, yet here they occupied completely different sides of Christian's world. Dana needed to draw him toward ordinary human interaction. King needed to represent the institutions closing around him. One approaches with nervous curiosity, the other with authority. Christian barely changes his outward behavior around either person, so their contrasting energies help the audience detect the smaller shifts Affleck places beneath the surface. Kendrick was an especially sharp choice because Dana could easily have become a generic woman requiring rescue. Kendrick's natural verbal rhythm prevents that. She speaks quickly, reacts visibly, and turns discomfort into comedy, making her an ideal counterweight to Affleck's pauses. Yet the casting does not reduce Dana to comic relief. Kendrick can communicate intelligence without making it feel performative, which is crucial in scenes where Dana must identify patterns that trained executives overlook. Her smaller physical presence also changes the visual balance beside Affleck. Christian appears even more imposing, but Dana never seems intellectually intimidated by him. The relationship works because she is curious about his mind before she is impressed by his violence. Then comes Jon Bernthal, the casting decision that quietly protects the film's most important secret. When reports emerged that he was negotiating to join the production, his role was kept undisclosed. Affleck was reportedly an admirer of his work, while Bernthal was arriving with momentum from The Walking Dead, The Wolf of Wall Street, and Fury. Audiences already associated him with aggression, volatility, and men who treat every room like a potential battlefield. Perfect. Braxton needs to feel dangerous immediately, but he also needs enough wounded humor that his eventual connection to Christian does not seem mechanically invented. Bernthal can threaten someone and somehow look abandoned at the same time. J.K. Simmons brings a different weapon: credibility. Ray King spends much of the film explaining information, assigning investigations, and occupying government offices. That is dangerous material for any actor because exposition can drain energy from a thriller. Simmons gives every sentence pressure. Coming directly from the acclaim surrounding Whiplash, he carried an intensity that allowed King to seem formidable even while sitting behind a desk. Cynthia Addai Robinson, Cast as Mary Beth Medina in January 2015, supplies the investigative urgency around him. She has to play Medina as both capable and cornered. A federal analyst offered an opportunity that also functions as a threat. The veteran's supporting choices add another layer of misdirection. John Lithgow's intelligence and approachable authority make Lamar Blackburn believable as a celebrated technology executive before the character's moral compromises emerge. Jean Smart gives Rita Blackburn a composed sharpness that suggests she understands more than the screenplay initially allows her to say. Jeffrey Tambor, playing Christian's prison mentor Francis Silverberg, brings weary humor to lessons that could otherwise sound like pure plot instruction. These performers make minor characters feel as though they possessed lives before Christian entered the room. That matters in a story already crowded with secret identities. Without actors capable of implying history, every revelation would feel like paperwork. There is no well-supported public record of traditional chemistry tests, extensive auditions, or a long list of runners-up beyond Smith's earlier attachment, so inventing a dramatic casting contest would distort the film's actual production history. What the available record shows is more straightforward. Affleck became the element that unlocked the package, and the surrounding cast was assembled rapidly in late 2014 and early 2015. The result is not merely an expensive collection of recognizable faces. Each actor supplies something Christian lacks: spontaneity, emotional heat, institutional power, or social ease. Affleck stands at the center, absorbing those contrasts. But choosing the right face for Christian was only the first calculation. The harder task was building the performance behind it. Ben Affleck's most important acting choice arrives before Christian Wolff says anything memorable. He walks into his modest accounting office, lowers himself into a chair, and seems to withdraw behind his own face. No swagger, no assassin pose, no invitation for the audience to admire him. Affleck plays Christian as a man who has spent his entire life reducing the number of signals he sends into the world. His shoulders remain controlled. His gaze rarely lingers where another person expects it to. Even his breathing appears organized. The result is not emptiness, it is containment. Christian always seems to be managing more sensation, calculation, and emotion than he is willing or able to reveal. Affleck and Gavin O'Connor did not approach the character by copying one autistic person. O'Connor said they entered the research process as though they knew nothing, meeting autistic adults and allowing those conversations to shape a composite character. He also made Affleck commit to the research before filming, believing that the role could not be constructed responsibly through surface mannerisms alone. That preparation does not settle every question surrounding the portrayal, but it explains Affleck's restraint. He avoids the attention-seeking tics that sometimes appear when actors play neurodivergent characters. Christian's behavior is specific, yet Affleck rarely turns that specificity into a performance begging to be noticed. Watch his voice. Affleck removes the casual musicality people normally use to soften conversation. Christian answers questions directly, often without the reassuring laugh, change in pitch, or facial response that another person might expect. When the elderly couple visiting his office worries about taxes, he does not become suddenly charming. He simply searches for a solution and finds one. His generosity emerges through action rather than emotional display. That scene establishes the central pattern of the performance. Christian may not communicate care conventionally, but he repeatedly notices what other people need. Affleck lets the audience discover the compassion instead of placing a spotlight over it. That distinction becomes crucial because the screenplay keeps surrounding Christian with almost mythic abilities. He can reconstruct years of fraudulent accounting, shoot with extreme precision, defeat multiple attackers, and anticipate criminal behavior. Played too confidently, he becomes a fantasy wearing autism as decoration. Affleck counters that danger by making ordinary interaction genuinely difficult. Christian can enter an armed compound without visible fear, yet Dana's friendly questions leave him searching for a socially acceptable response. Violence has rules he understands. Conversation changes without warning. The contrast gives the character vulnerability without making him physically helpless. a far more interesting tension than the usual action hero who fears nothing except emotional commitment. The Living Robotics investigation contains Affleck's most outwardly energetic acting, though energetic is relative. Christian covers windows and walls with figures, moving from one calculation to another as the pattern begins to reveal itself. His tempo increases, his concentration narrows, everyone else disappears. Affleck does not play the sequence as a genius showing off. He plays it as relief. The incompleteness has been creating pressure inside Christian, and each recovered number releases part of it. Then Lamar ends the audit early. Christian's reaction is immediate and painful. His body stiffens, his speech becomes urgent, and the controlled adult briefly seems connected to the distressed child seen in the flashbacks. An unfinished equation is not a professional inconvenience. It is an open wound. Seth Lee, who plays Christian as a child, gives Affleck a physical vocabulary to inherit. The rocking, difficulty-regulating sensory overload and fierce attachment to completing a task establish behaviors that reappear in altered adult form. Affleck wisely avoids imitating Lee mechanically. Instead, he shows what decades of discipline have done to those impulses. The child's distress is visible to everyone in the room. The adult has learned to compress it into tightened muscles, shortened sentences, and punishing private routines. Two actors portray the same nervous system at different stages of adaptation. The connection feels strongest when Christian's control fails, because we can sense the younger version pushing through. The nightly ritual inside Christian's trailer is the performance's most disturbing expression of that control. He exposes himself to flashing light, deafening music, and intense physical pressure, using repetition to endure overwhelming sensation. Affleck plays the routine without self-pity. That makes it harder to watch. Christian treats suffering as maintenance, a procedure required to remain functional. His father taught him to confront discomfort rather than escape it, and the adult Christian has converted that philosophy into self-administered punishment. Affleck's face barely changes, but the scene tells us how much violence Christian has absorbed long before he directs violence toward anyone else. For the action sequences, Affleck trained for months in Pencak Silat, the Southeast Asian fighting system selected because O'Connor wanted Christian's combat style to appear economical and efficient. The choreography also drew on disciplines including judo and jiu-jitsu. That training serves the performance because Christian does not fight like Batman. There is little theatrical intimidation and almost no wasted movement. He closes distance, disables the threat, and stops. Affleck maintains the same concentration during a gunfight that Christian displays while examining a ledger. Numbers and violence occupy different moral worlds, but his body processes them through the same demand for precision. The motel room conversation with Dana proves Affleck can make tiny changes feel enormous. Christian begins in his usual defensive rhythm, but curiosity slowly overrides discomfort. He answers more than necessary. He permits humor. He looks at Dana with something approaching ease, then retreats whenever the interaction threatens to become emotionally undefined. Affleck never pushes the scene toward conventional romance. His achievement is smaller and better. Christian enjoys another person's company and does not know what to do with that enjoyment. A faint smile becomes a dramatic event because the performance has taught us how expensive spontaneity is for him. His scenes with Braxton expose the anger beneath the order. Christian initially responds to the revelation with combat because combat is the available language. Once recognition breaks through, Affleck's composure fractures. Confusion, guilt, and abandoned affection crowd into his face before the words can catch up. He does not suddenly transform into an openly emotional brother. That would betray the character built across the film. Instead, the feeling arrives in interrupted bursts, as though Christian is translating it while experiencing it. Affleck's performance works best in precisely these moments, when the stillness remains, but we finally understand how much the stillness has been holding. The portrayal is not beyond criticism. Christian combines autism, savant-level mathematics, and elite lethality in a way that risks turning neurodivergence into exotic action mythology. No performance can represent an entire spectrum, and the film occasionally allows exceptional ability to overshadow everyday humanity. Yet Affleck keeps pulling Christian back from abstraction. He finds kindness in practical gestures, humor in literal honesty, and pain in the need for completion. This is not his loudest performance. It may be one of his most disciplined. And discipline only becomes fully visible when another actor pushes against it, which is exactly what Anna Kendrick, John Bernthal, J.K. Simmons, and the rest of the ensemble were hired to do. Affleck's performance depends on containment, but containment means little unless other actors give it something to resist. That is the supporting cast's real function in The Accountant. They do not merely deliver information or populate Christian's increasingly complicated world. Each represents a form of human connection he cannot comfortably manage. Dana offers uncomplicated curiosity. Braxton brings the rage of abandoned family. Ray King carries moral debt. Francis Silverberg provides intellectual mentorship. Put them around Christian, and his silence changes meaning from scene to scene. Sometimes it looks like concentration, sometimes fear, sometimes guilt. The ensemble makes those distinctions visible without forcing Affleck to explain them. Anna Kendrick supplies the warmth the film desperately needs. Dana Cummings is the employee who first notices the financial irregularity at Living Robotics, but Kendrick refuses to play her like a thriller's designated civilian. Dana is intelligent, observant, and socially awkward in her own way. Kendrick described being drawn to the character partly because her own mother was an accountant, but the personal connection is less important than what she brings on screen. Verbal momentum. Dana talks when Christian withdraws. She jokes when he becomes literal. She turns dead air into nervous energy, creating an unexpectedly gentle rhythm between two people who find numbers easier than emotions. Their chemistry works because Kendrick never treats Christian as a puzzle she is entitled to solve. Dana is curious, certainly, but not patronizing. During their conversation at the hotel, she responds to his unusual communication patterns without transforming the scene into a lesson about autism. She talks about herself. She admits embarrassment. She lets the interaction become reciprocal. Kendrick's openness also prevents the film from becoming emotionally airless. Whenever Christian's criminal history, military precision, and sensory routines threaten to turn him into an abstract concept, Dana reacts to him as a person. Her presence says that he can be strange, intimidating, and still worth knowing. John Bernthal does the opposite. As Braxton, he enters scenes carrying loose, restless aggression, the physical and emotional energy Affleck has removed from Christian. Bernthal smiles during threats, circles rooms, and speaks with the relaxed confidence of someone who enjoys being underestimated. Yet beneath that swagger sits a child who believes his brother left him behind. This is the performance's secret weapon. Before the family connection is confirmed, Bernthal's mercenary seems almost too charismatic for a secondary villain. Afterward, that charisma becomes camouflage. The jokes, cruelty, and theatrical confidence are ways of controlling the room before anyone can abandon him again. Bernthal makes resentment look like personality. The brothers' climactic confrontation succeeds because Affleck and Bernthal play emotional history through completely different bodies. Christian responds to recognition by freezing. Braxton responds by attacking. One compresses pain. The other hurls it across the room. When Braxton demands an explanation for Christian's disappearance, Bernthal's voice carries more injury than anger, even while the men are beating each other bloody. That collision rescues the third act from becoming a purely mechanical twist. The revelation is melodramatic, wildly so, but the actors locate the simple wound underneath it. Two brothers survived the same father and came away believing the other had chosen to leave. J.K. Simmons and Cynthia Addai-Robinson form a quieter partnership on the investigative side. Simmons plays Treasury Director Ray King as a man whose authority conceals dependence. He appears to be assigning Medina the hunt for Christian, yet his long confession eventually exposes how deeply Christian has shaped his career. Simmons can make exposition feel like pressure rather than information. His clipped delivery keeps King formidable even when the character spends minutes explaining the past. Addai-Robinson counters him with alert stillness. Medina understands that the assignment is an opportunity, a threat, and a test of how much institutional power she is willing to tolerate. Their scenes turn investigation into negotiation. Jeffrey Tambor brings weary humanity to Francis Silverberg, Christian's prison mentor. The role could have been nothing more than a device for explaining offshore finance and criminal accounting, but Tambor gives Francis the bruised patience of a man who recognizes Christian's abilities before Christian understands how to use them. Their relationship carries an unusual tenderness. Francis does not ask Christian to become socially conventional. He teaches him how the criminal world operates and trusts him to absorb the system. When the consequences of that connection return later, Christian's reaction communicates loyalty more powerfully than any sentimental speech could have done. John Lithgow and Jean Smart are almost too effective for the limited room the screenplay gives them. Lithgow's Lamar Blackburn combines paternal charm with the smooth certainty of a man accustomed to controlling the official version of events. Smart's Rita appears sharper and more cautious, creating the sense that an entire corporate marriage exists beyond the scenes we witness. The film underuses both actors, particularly Smart, whose character becomes more valuable to the plot than to the drama. Still, their authority helps sell Living Robotics as an institution with history rather than a temporary location built around a conspiracy. Allison Wright, meanwhile, gives the adult Justine a calm vocal presence that connects Christian's violent professional life to the childhood relationship he never abandoned. The ensemble is not perfectly balanced. Dana disappears for long stretches. Medina spends too much time receiving explanations, and several veteran actors are reduced to delivering pieces of the mystery before leaving it. Yet the performances keep the film from collapsing beneath its own plot. Kendrick gives Christian ease, Bernthal gives him history, Simmons gives him consequence, Tambor gives him guidance. Together, they transform a solitary action hero into someone defined by damaged connections. Those relationships provide the emotional architecture. But the physical world surrounding them, from Christian's anonymous office to his carefully arranged trailer, tells an equally revealing story. Christian Wolff's most revealing possession is not one of his rifles, false passports, or priceless paintings. It is the Airstream trailer containing all of them. From the outside, the vehicle looks portable, polished, and almost anonymous. Inside, every object has a designated position. Weapons sit beside currency, valuable artwork, and the tools needed to disappear without warning. It is less a home than a perfectly arranged escape plan. Production designer Keith P. Cunningham understood that Christian's surroundings could communicate what the character rarely verbalizes. He desires stability, yet he has constructed a life that can be dismantled and removed within minutes. Safety means order. Freedom means never becoming attached to one place. Gavin O'Connor developed the film's visual identity with Cunningham and cinematographer Seamus McGarvey, repeatedly working through the screenplay until its tone, palette, and physical spaces felt unified. The production shot around Atlanta and used a soundstage in nearby Decatur, where the crew built the trailer's interior. That set had to appear genuinely compact while remaining movable enough for cameras and lighting equipment. Cunningham filled it with warm finishes and carefully organized surfaces, creating perhaps the only environment where Christian appears completely at ease. It is pristine without feeling luxurious. Everything is useful. Everything is controlled. Even beauty has been cataloged. Set decorator Douglas A. Mowat helped turn the trailer into a collision between two versions of its owner. One side belongs to the quiet financial specialist. Documents, collectibles, currency, and meticulously stored information. The other belongs to the combat professional. Firearms, tactical equipment, and identities prepared for emergencies. Cunningham described the mixture as both cerebral and dangerous, and that contradiction defines Christian better than any speech. The expensive paintings are especially telling. He possesses objects created for contemplation and public display, yet keeps them hidden inside a storage facility. Christian understands value mathematically. Enjoying that value emotionally is more complicated. His art collection becomes another relationship conducted at a safe distance. Finding the physical Airstream required an extensive search that ended in Texas, where the production located a rare custom model in remarkably good condition. The exterior vehicle and constructed interior together create a visual paradox. Christian's real home is both exceptionally valuable and deliberately concealed. His suburban ranch house works in the opposite direction. It is visible but nearly empty, designed to satisfy anyone observing him without exposing anything meaningful. Sparse furniture and neutral surfaces make it look less inhabited than staged. Only the surveillance technology and defensive preparations hint at the person living there. One residence protects his possessions. The other protects his cover. Neither offers the untidy evidence of an ordinary life. ZZZ's accounting extends the disguise into public space. Cunningham used a small strip mall in Roswell for Christian's storefront office, choosing an environment so visually unremarkable that it almost disappears. Beige walls, practical furniture, and modest signage sell the image of a local accountant helping families navigate tax season. The office does not express Christian's personality because its entire purpose is to suppress it. Yet his kindness still leaks through the blandness. Photographs, familiar clients, and the ordinary clutter of paperwork suggest that this false identity has accidentally developed real human connections. Christian may regard the office as camouflage, but the people entering it do not. To them, it is part of a community. Living Robotics presents the opposite design philosophy. Georgia Tech supplied the modern architecture for the company's headquarters, while a glass-walled conference room became the central visual feature of Christian's audit. Glass usually implies transparency. Here, it becomes a surface covered by evidence of deception. Thousands of red and black figures spread across the walls until the clean corporate space looks infected by its own hidden mathematics. An accounting professor helped devise credible financial formulas, and the art department reproduced Affleck's handwriting on transparent, static-cling material, applying it in stages while leaving areas where he could write during filming. A potentially dull act of calculation becomes physical world-building. The numbers consume the room because they have already consumed Christian. That conference room also exposes the illusion behind Lamar Blackburn's company. Living Robotics presents itself as sleek, innovative, and socially valuable, but its polished surfaces conceal corrupted accounts. Blackburn's mansion follows the same pattern. The production used an upscale Atlanta residence for the exterior and constructed its multi-level interior on stage, echoing the company's contemporary design. Lamar surrounds himself with openness, height, and expensive simplicity, yet those spaces are no more honest than Christian's false house. The difference is moral. Christian uses minimalism to hide from dangerous people. Lamar uses elegance to hide what he has done to other people. Similar visual language. Completely different guilt. Costume designer Nancy Steiner carries this hidden-in-plain-sight philosophy onto Christian's body. At work, he wears restrained suits, white shirts, and deliberately understated ties. At home or around the Rice family, a Carhartt jacket makes him look like an ordinary working man. Only when he anticipates combat does the disguise fall away, and black tactical clothing take over. Dana's wardrobe follows a subtler progression, beginning conservatively before becoming slightly softer as her emotional curiosity grows. The change never turns her into a glamorous action film accessory. It merely lets costume track a woman becoming more willing to be noticed while Christian continues dressing not to be seen. Atlanta's Academy of Medicine became the Treasury offices, Gwinnett County's jail facilities stood in for Leavenworth, and a farm near Bishop supplied the welcoming rural home of Frank and Dolores Rice. These locations give the film several distinct social worlds without breaking its subdued visual logic. Government interiors feel heavy with institutional history. The prison feels rigid and enclosed. The farm offers texture, warmth, and evidence of daily life, the exact qualities Christian's private spaces reject. That is the quiet achievement of the production design. It does not build an extravagant fantasy around Christian's unusual abilities. It builds systems. Corporate systems, domestic systems, institutional systems, and escape systems. Every room asks whether order provides security or merely disguises fear. Cunningham constructs those spaces, but their emotional effect depends on how the camera frames depth, emptiness, and confinement. The sets establish Christian's world. Seamus McGarvey's cinematography determines how closely we are allowed to enter it. The most visually revealing moment in The Accountant may be Christian Wolff sitting alone at an ordinary desk. The frame is wide, the room is quiet, and empty space presses against him from every side. Seamus McGarvey's cinematography does not immediately chase Christian's thoughts or force the audience into his perspective. It watches him, measures him, keeps its distance. That restraint creates the film's central visual tension. Christian is constantly being observed, yet rarely understood. The camera treats him like one of the equations covering the walls at Living Robotics. Precise, fascinating, and incomplete until every piece has been placed in the correct position. McGarvey and Gavin O'Connor chose to shoot the film on 35mm rather than digital, using Kodak Vision 3 500T 5219 stock with Panavision Panaflex XL cameras and Panavision Primo lenses. The film was framed in the ultra-wide 2.391 ratio, giving the filmmakers enough horizontal space to isolate Christian within offices, corridors, and carefully organized rooms. McGarvey described the intended look as sparse and stripped down, designed to mirror the orderliness of Christian's world. The production also found that disciplined film stock management could remain financially competitive with a digital workflow. That wide frame becomes a psychological instrument. In many action movies, the format exists to make landscapes larger and confrontations more spectacular. Here, it often makes Christian appear smaller. He sits at one edge of a composition while architecture occupies the rest. Doorways, window frames, and shelves divide the screen into clean, geometric sections, as though the world has already been converted into columns and boxes. He belongs inside that order, but he is trapped by it too. Even when the frame appears balanced, Christian rarely feels relaxed. Perfection becomes pressure. McGarvey stopped down the lenses to increase depth of field, meaning more of the image remains sharply focused from foreground to background. That choice gives Christian's surroundings a hard, almost analytical clarity. Nothing dissolves into a comforting blur. The objects behind him remain visible, the lines of the room remain firm, and distractions cannot simply disappear. The filmmakers also drained much of the color from the image, favoring restrained grays, browns, and institutional blues. The result is not completely monochromatic, but it feels emotionally filtered, as though spontaneity has been removed along with saturation. The Living Robotics audit offers the clearest marriage of cinematography and character. At first, the conference room appears clean and transparent. Then Christian begins covering its glass walls with calculations. McGarvey frequently shoots through those numbers, allowing figures to float across Affleck's face or separate him from the people watching outside. It is a simple image with several meanings. Christian understands the company through mathematics, while the employees understand Christian only through the barrier. The more clearly he sees their fraud, the harder it becomes for them to see him as an ordinary person. Knowledge creates distance. Camera movement follows a similar divide. During Christian's daily life, shots are usually measured and stable. The camera pans because information requires it, not because the filmmakers want to manufacture urgency. Christian moves through these compositions with the controlled economy of someone who has rehearsed every routine. When violence arrives, that visual discipline begins to fracture. McGarvey used configurations suited to handheld and Steadicam work for the action, allowing the camera to become more mobile without abandoning spatial clarity. The shift is felt immediately. The world that Christian has organized suddenly moves around him. Yet the action is never photographed as uncontrolled chaos. During Dana's rescue, Christian advances through enclosed spaces with unnerving efficiency. The framing keeps the geography readable, where the attackers are, where Dana is hiding, and how quickly Christian closes the distance. Cuts accelerate, but they do not disguise the choreography. This matters because Christian's violence is presented as calculation. A shaking camera and fragmented editing would make him look desperate. Instead, the images show a man solving a lethal problem one movement at a time. Brutal, clean, almost procedural. The long-range shooting sequences use negative space differently. Christian is often separated physically from his target, turning the wide frame into a map of distance and consequence. The rifle scope compresses that space into a narrow field of certainty: target, breath, trigger. Outside the scope, however, the world remains morally complicated. McGarvey's compositions let the audience experience the seductive precision of Christian's skill while preserving enough distance to make that skill unsettling. The shots are satisfying in the language of action cinema, but cold enough that satisfaction never becomes uncomplicated celebration. The flashbacks soften the visual system slightly without abandoning it. Young Christian's world contains more movement, more domestic texture, and more people invading the frame. Yet the childhood scenes are hardly warm nostalgia. Rooms feel crowded during sensory overload, and the camera's proximity makes sound, motion, and human frustration appear inescapable. Adult Christian has responded by stripping his environment down to essentials. The contrast connects past and present visually. The boy cannot control what enters his space, while the man controls everything so tightly that almost nobody can enter at all. As the story approaches the Blackburn mansion, McGarvey allows the image to become rougher and more heavily textured. He explained that the escalating action required the look to grow grittier, using the flexibility of the 500T negative and later color grading to increase grain and contrast while keeping the film visually coherent. The mansion sequence, therefore, feels like Christian's controlled aesthetic being pushed toward collapse. Darkness deepens. Movement becomes less predictable. The clean lines remain, but violence tears through them. That progression is the cinematography's greatest achievement. It does not simply make Christian look mysterious or transform accounting into visual spectacle. It builds a formal system around him, then gradually introduces pressure until that system begins to break. Wide frames express isolation. Deep focus expresses relentless awareness. Desaturated color expresses emotional restriction. Controlled movement expresses routine. When those elements shift, we feel Christian shifting with them even when Affleck's face barely moves. The eyes decode his world through composition, but the body experiences it through another force entirely: the clicks, pulses, gunshots, silences, and carefully controlled noise of the film's soundscape. The accountant does not announce Christian Wolff with a heroic anthem. It gives him a pulse. Low electronics hover beneath the image. Restrained percussion marks time, and small repeating patterns seem to calculate themselves in the background. The music does not describe a fearless killer. It describes a mind searching for structure. That distinction is everything. A conventional action score might enlarge Christian until he becomes mythic. Mark Isham's music usually moves in the opposite direction, drawing us toward the machinery beneath his stillness. The repetition, anxiety, and concentration that Affleck's face refuses to explain. Isham called The Accountant a modern hybrid score, built through electronics, programmed sounds, and extensive manipulation rather than relying exclusively on a traditional orchestra. That approach fits both the character and the film's unstable genre identity. Christian lives between categories: accountant and assassin, caregiver and criminal, vulnerable man and unstoppable combatant. The score occupies a similar border. Electronic textures supply precision and emotional distance, while acoustic and orchestral elements provide traces of warmth that the character cannot comfortably express himself. Machine outside, human underneath. The soundtrack album contains 17 pieces and runs for slightly more than an hour. Even its titles map Christian's fragmented identity. Do You Like Puzzles? Specialized Training, Famous Mathematicians, The Panama Pump, and The Trial of Solomon Grundy. These are not grand declarations of good and evil. They are references to routines, locations, memories, and systems. Isham's score approaches Christian the way Christian approaches an audit, through recurring information whose emotional meaning becomes clear only after enough pieces have accumulated. The principal musical language is repetition. Figures return with slight alterations, holding to a measured tempo while tension grows around them. That makes the score feel mathematical without resorting to the obvious gimmick of turning equations into musical notation. The effect is psychological rather than literal. Repeated pulses resemble Christian's routines. The same close, the same controlled movements, the same need to finish whatever pattern he has begun. When the music refuses to resolve, it creates the sonic equivalent of an unfinished ledger. Something remains open. Christian cannot rest until it closes. Listen to the Living Robotics audit. The music does not attempt to make handwriting physically exciting through oversized brass or rapid action percussion. Instead, it aligns itself with concentration. Layers accumulate as Christian moves across the glass walls, and the growing pattern creates momentum. The audience begins to experience calculation as pursuit. Every recovered connection moves him closer to the hidden theft, while the score quietly tightens the space around him. Then the investigation is stopped. The musical and psychological rhythm breaks together, making Lamar's decision feel almost violent before anyone draws a weapon. Isham also understands when to retreat. Christian and Dana's quieter interactions are not smothered by a theme insisting that romance has begun. Their pauses remain awkward. We hear the effort required to keep the conversation alive. Music enters carefully, offering warmth without translating every expression for us. That restraint protects Affleck's performance. A sentimental melody would tell the audience exactly what Christian feels, while the film's more reserved approach lets uncertainty survive. Is he comfortable? Interested? Overwhelmed? Probably all three. The soundtrack gives him emotional space without pretending that the answer is simple. Sound becomes far more aggressive during Christian's private sensory ritual. The flashing lights are visual, but the scene's physical discomfort comes from the audio. Pounding noise, repeated impact, and the measured recitation of Solomon Grundy. The nursery rhyme turns childhood language into a disciplinary mechanism. Its predictable structure offers order, while the surrounding volume transforms that order into punishment. The soundtrack album's The Trial of Solomon Grundy preserves the phrase in its musical architecture, linking Christian's adult routine to the training and distress of his childhood. Then come the gunshots. They are sharp, heavy, and startlingly final. The sound mix rarely romanticizes prolonged exchanges of fire. Christian's preferred violence is controlled and economical, so each report functions like punctuation. Shot, impact, silence. The space after the sound matters almost as much as the sound itself. It gives the audience time to register how quickly Christian has changed the situation. His attacks do not create the noisy exhilaration of a battlefield. They create subtraction. Threats are present, and then they are not. The film's credited sound crew included supervising sound editor and re-recording mixer Mark Mangini, re-recording mixer Gary Summers, production sound mixer Whit Norris, sound designers Ann Sibeli and Charlie Campagna, sound effects editor Piero Mura, and dialogue editor Kira Rosler. Their collective challenge was balance. The soundtrack had to preserve quiet speech and tiny behavioral details while leaving room for rifles, close-quarters combat, electronic tension, and Isham's layered score. Too much force and Christian's interiority disappears. Too little and the action loses weight. That balance is clearest during the confrontation between Christian and Braxton. The sequence begins through the familiar grammar of action: footsteps, weapons, impacts, and spatial threat, but gradually makes room for voices. Once recognition occurs, the emotional argument becomes louder than the combat, even when the brothers continue hitting each other. Bernthal's wounded accusations cut through the physical noise. The scene works because the mix understands that the real weapon is memory. Violence supplies rhythm. Abandonment supplies meaning. Isham's score is not the kind most viewers leave humming, and that is exactly right. Christian himself is not emotionally legible in the manner of a traditional hero. The music operates beneath conscious attention, imposing patterns, releasing pressure, and making silence feel deliberate rather than empty. What the image presents as stillness, the soundtrack exposes as constant internal movement. Yet many of these sonic effects depended on practical conditions: locations, weapons, stunt work, schedules, and production decisions made under pressure. Behind the film's controlled surface was a much less orderly journey to the screen. The making of The Accountant did not generate stories of spectacular accidents, public feuds, or a production collapsing under impossible conditions. Its behind-the-scenes drama was quieter: a complicated screenplay, a a sensitive central portrayal, and an action film that had to remain psychologically controlled even while bullets tore through walls. Gavin O'Connor's challenge was coordination. Every department needed to understand that Christian Wolff's violence, mathematics, and autism could not feel like three unrelated concepts forced into the same movie. The production therefore relied less on happy accidents than on preparation, researching the character, designing an exact physical language, and constructing locations around the way Christian experiences order. Principal photography began in Atlanta on January 19, 2015, and wrapped on April 2nd. Georgia gave the filmmakers a wide range of environments within one production base: modern corporate architecture, government interiors, suburban homes, rural property, and controlled stage space. Roswell, Lawrenceville, Athens, and locations around Atlanta all contributed to the film's fictional geography. Georgia Tech became one of the most recognizable sites, particularly for scenes involving Christian and Dana at Living Robotics. Filming there occurred during the university's spring break, reducing the disruption caused by placing a Hollywood crew inside an active campus. The Georgia Tech work demonstrates how unglamorous logistical decisions shape what audiences eventually accept as a coherent world. Production occupied areas around the Klaus Advanced Computing Building, including its courtyard and nearby roads, with sections closed or restricted during filming. The location already possessed the glass, metal, and technological character required for Living Robotics, allowing the movie to suggest a major scientific company without constructing an entire headquarters from nothing. That is smart mid-budget filmmaking. Spend money where the camera will feel it, then let existing architecture provide scale. The polished campus environment becomes convincing corporate mythology once Affleck begins covering its transparent surfaces with numbers. Those equations required far more coordination than the finished sequence suggests. The financial patterns had to look credible, appear in controlled stages, and remain consistent between shots. Affleck needed to perform sections of the calculations while the art department managed the much larger design surrounding him. In scenes like this, continuity becomes its own form of action choreography. One misplaced figure or mismatched section of writing could break the illusion that Christian has constructed the entire audit through uninterrupted concentration. The audience sees mathematical obsession. The crew sees layers of prepared surfaces, matching camera positions, and a performer required to repeat precise physical actions while preserving emotional intensity. The physical action demanded a different kind of repetition. O'Connor worked with stunt coordinator and second unit director Sam Hargrave and fight coordinator Fernando Chian to find a combat style suited to Christian. They settled on Pencak Silat, a Southeast Asian martial art tradition whose direct, close-range movements matched the character's preference for efficiency. Affleck trained in the system and performed more visible action than he had under Batman's mask, where stunt substitution could be hidden more easily. Christian's fights had to show his face because his concentration is part of the choreography. Every strike needed to look like a deliberate solution, not an actor surviving a complicated routine. Hargrave's role gave the action unit unusual importance. The accountant was among his earliest jobs directing second unit material, years before he became known for staging the extended action sequences of Extraction. His task here was not simply to increase spectacle. The second unit had to preserve O'Connor's character logic, readable geography, minimal wasted motion, and violence that ends with abrupt finality. That is harder than filming chaos. Chaos can hide weak movement inside quick cuts and shaking frames. Christian's precision exposes everything. The camera must see where he stands, what he notices, and exactly how he removes each threat. Affleck's preparation also extended beyond fighting. O'Connor insisted that the character's autism could not be assembled from familiar cinematic gestures, so director and actor conducted substantial research before filming. They met people across the spectrum and built Christian as a composite rather than attempting to imitate one individual. That process gave Affleck behavioral foundations to carry through long shooting days. Controlled eye contact, literal speech, repeated physical patterns, and the careful management of sensory pressure. O'Connor's approach was demanding because continuity here was emotional as well as physical. Christian could not suddenly become socially fluent because a scene needed warmth or conventionally expressive because the climax needed tears. The decision to shoot on 35 millimeters imposed another useful discipline. Cinematographer Seamus McGarvey and the producers concluded that celluloid could remain cost-effective when the production avoided overshooting and approached each setup with preparation. Film stock makes casual repetition expensive. That limitation suited O'Connor, whose method depends on understanding a scene's intention before arriving on set. The crew used Kodak Vision 3 500T stock with Panavision equipment, designing a restrained image that could gradually become rougher as the action escalated. Artistic control and financial control became the same decision. Know what you need, capture it efficiently, and resist the temptation to manufacture choices later. That preparation did not mean O'Connor ran an emotionally sterile set. His directing style begins with explaining what the movie is trying to say, then asking actors to serve that intention through their own choices. The distinction mattered with Affleck, an accomplished director in his own right. O'Connor established that Affleck would remain an actor on this production, and Affleck respected the arrangement rather than turning their collaboration into a contest for authority. With a cast including J.K. Simmons, Jeffrey Tambor, Anna Kendrick, and John Lithgow, the director's job was less about controlling inexperienced performers than giving highly capable actors the same emotional compass. No major on-set conflict, serious injury, or emergency reshoot has been reliably documented, and manufacturing such drama would misrepresent the production. The real achievement is that a film with so many moving pieces arrived looking unified. Location work blends with stage construction. Affleck's physical preparation blends with Hargrave's choreography. Research into autism blends, sometimes imperfectly, with the mechanics of a studio thriller. The crew turned accounting into visual action and close-quarters combat into character behavior. That kind of control rarely produces sensational gossip. It produces usable footage. Yet production discipline does not guarantee commercial success. Warner Brothers still had to sell audiences a movie whose hero prepares taxes, audits criminals, and kills with frightening accuracy. A premise caught somewhere between prestige drama and franchise entertainment. Once cameras stopped and the release date approached, the next calculation belonged to the marketplace. And unlike Christian's ledgers, box office numbers do not always reveal their meaning immediately. For a movie about an accountant, the most revealing equation may be its own box office performance. The Accountant was neither a low-cost thriller that could succeed quietly, nor a giant franchise spectacle guaranteed to dominate through brand recognition. It occupied Hollywood's increasingly endangered middle ground, an adult-oriented, R-rated studio film built around a movie star, an original screenplay, and a premise that could not be explained in one clean sentence. Warner Brothers was selling accounting, autism, family trauma, and execution-style action in the same package. That should have been difficult. Financially, however, the strange mixture became part of the attraction. Published budget figures vary slightly. The numbers reports a production budget of $40 million, while Box Office Mojo lists $44 million. Either figure places the film far below the cost of the superhero productions surrounding Affleck at the time, yet high enough that a weak theatrical run would have hurt. This was not a tiny genre experiment. The recognizable ensemble, Atlanta location work, 35mm photography, and extensive action production required meaningful investment. The commercial gamble depended on Affleck's name convincing mainstream audiences to approach material that might otherwise have looked too peculiar for a wide release. Warner Brothers opened the film domestically on October 14, 2016 in 3,332 theaters. It earned approximately $24.7 million during its first weekend and took first place at the box office. That opening represented more than half of the higher reported production budget, before accounting for marketing costs, theater shares, and other expenses. More importantly, it demonstrated immediate audience interest. People did not need years of franchise familiarity to understand the appeal. The image of Ben Affleck as a quiet mathematical genius who could dismantle both financial fraud and armed attackers, was apparently enough. The opening was solid rather than explosive, but the film's durability tells the better story. Its second weekend brought in roughly $13.6 million, dollars, a decline of about 45%. The third dropped by approximately 38%, followed by smaller declines of 31 and 25% over the next two weekends. Those numbers indicate that the movie did not vanish once Affleck's core audience had attended. The numbers calculates a domestic multiplier, or legs, meaning the final domestic total divided by the opening weekend, of 349. For a violent R-rated thriller, that is healthy staying power. That hold matters because the critical response was mixed. The film could not depend on universal reviews declaring it essential viewing. Instead, its theatrical run appears to have benefited from the more basic pleasure of audience recommendation. The premise promised something odd, and the finished movie delivered enough action, mystery, and emotional accessibility to keep viewers curious. Its structural clutter may have frustrated critics, but the twists also gave ordinary moviegoers material to discuss afterward. Christian's hidden identity, Braxton's reveal, and the possibility of further adventures turned an original thriller into something resembling an unofficial franchise audition. By the end of its domestic run, The Accountant had earned approximately $86, $3 million in the United States and Canada. International markets contributed another $69.3 million, producing a worldwide theatrical total of about $155.6 million. The domestic market supplied 55.5% of that figure, an unusually substantial share for a modern studio release, while overseas territories contributed 44.5%. The movie traveled reasonably well, but its strongest commercial connection remained with North American audiences responding to Affleck, the thriller format, and the film's distinctly American mixture of individualism, firearms, and damaged family mythology. Comparing worldwide gross directly with production budget produces an attractive figure. The theatrical total reached roughly 3.5 to nearly 4 times the reported cost. But that does not mean the studio simply placed more than $100 million in profit into a bank account. Cinemas retain part of ticket revenue, international returns vary by territory, and the publicly reported budget usually excludes worldwide advertising and distribution expenses. Precise profit figures have not been publicly established. The safer conclusion is still clear. The theatrical performance was strong enough to move the film beyond mere cost recovery and into commercially valuable territory. The movie continued earning after theaters. The numbers estimates approximately $10 million in domestic DVD sales and $10.7 million in Blu-ray sales, for physical disc revenue exceeding $20.7 million. Variety later reported that The Accountant was the most rented home entertainment title of 2017 across disc and digital platforms. That may be the film's most revealing commercial achievement. Audiences did not simply buy tickets during the initial marketing campaign. They kept discovering, renting, and revisiting it after the theatrical conversation had ended. Home viewing suits the film. Its puzzles invite rewatching, Affleck's restrained performance benefits from closer attention, and the genre mixture becomes less awkward once viewers know where the story is heading. The movie may have been marketed through gunfire, but repeat engagement likely depended on Christian himself. Audiences responded to his routines, blunt humor, and damaged relationship with Braxton as much as his ability to eliminate armed men. A generic assassin thriller can produce a respectable weekend. A memorable character creates long-term value. Commercially, then, The Accountant succeeded by refusing to behave like a disposable action release. It opened well, held steadily, earned more than $155 million worldwide, and developed a durable second life in home entertainment. The numbers confirm that audiences saw franchise potential before the industry fully acted upon it. Yet financial approval and artistic approval are different calculations. Audiences largely embraced Christian Wolff, while critics remained sharply divided over the screenplay, tone, and representation of autism. The next ledger is therefore less orderly, because critical reception produced figures that never balanced quite as neatly. The strangest thing about The Accountant's reception is that critics and audiences appear to have watched two different films. Critics saw a thriller overloaded with investigations, flashbacks, family revelations, and an uneasy attempt to connect autism with action movie mythology. Audiences saw Christian Wolff. They liked his routines, his dry literalism, his terrifying competence, and the possibility that this unusual hero might return. Both reactions make sense. The film's construction is messy. Its central character is magnetic. That contradiction has defined its reputation far more accurately than any single review score ever could. As of August 2026, Rotten Tomatoes records a 53% critics score from 285 reviews, compared with a 77% audience score from more than 25,000 ratings. Metacritic tells almost the same story. A Metascore of 51 from 45 professional reviews against a 7.3 user rating. IMDb users also hold the film at 7. 3 out of 10, based on roughly 399,000 votes. These are not tiny sampling differences. They reveal a sustained divide between reviewers judging narrative construction and viewers responding to character, action, and rewatchability. The critics saw the faulty equation. The audience enjoyed solving it. Positive reviewers tended to praise exactly what the film does differently. Affleck's controlled performance, the strange combination of financial procedure and gunplay, and O'Connor's refusal to treat Christian like a conventional wisecracking action hero all gave the movie an identity. Some critics found the complexity engaging even when individual pieces failed to connect, while others accepted the absurdity because the action remained tense and the central character remained compelling. The most generous response was essentially this: the movie does not always add up, but its eccentricity creates entertainment that a smoother, safer thriller would have lost. The negative reviews attack the same qualities from the opposite direction. The screenplay piles mystery upon mystery until the final act must explain relationships instead of allowing them to develop. Ray King's confession slows the pursuit to deliver backstory. Braxton's identity turns an armed assault into a family reunion. Justine's adult role arrives as another answer withheld for maximum surprise. Critics also questioned the tonal collision between intimate disability drama and execution-heavy action spectacle. Rotten Tomatoes consensus praised Affleck's commitment while describing the surrounding thriller as scattered, and several Metacritic reviews focused on weak motivation, overcrowded exposition, and a finale combining violence, coincidence, and sentimentality. That criticism lands. The Accountant wants Christian to be a wounded human being, a forensic genius, a misunderstood outsider, a criminal world legend, and a potential franchise superhero, all within 128 minutes. The movie occasionally mistakes accumulation for complexity. Yet critics sometimes underestimated how strongly those contradictory identities feed the audience's fascination. Christian does not fit cleanly into a familiar category. He resembles Jason Bourne, stripped of improvisational ease, or an avenging gunslinger whose real superpower is pattern recognition. Ridiculous? Absolutely. But distinctiveness matters. Viewers can forgive an overcomplicated plot when the person moving through it feels unlike anyone else in the genre. Opening weekend polling confirmed that enthusiasm immediately. Audiences surveyed by CinemaScore awarded the film an A grade, while PostTrack recorded an 84% overall positive reaction. Deadline reported that response as unusually strong for the release. These viewers had not spent years transforming a mediocre theatrical experience into a cult favorite. They had just left the cinema. The gap existed from the beginning. Professional reviewers evaluated whether the film successfully balanced its ambitions. Ticket buyers responded more instinctively. Christian was interesting, the action was satisfying, and the emotional reveal involving Braxton worked even if its mechanics were improbable. The film's portrayal of autism produced the most important and least easily resolved debate. Some viewers appreciated seeing an autistic character presented as capable, independent, and central to an adult action film rather than reduced to helplessness. Others argued that the combination of savant-level mathematics, social isolation, and extraordinary combat ability reinforced Hollywood's narrow fascination with autistic people who possess exceptional powers. Disability advocates also criticize the absence of autistic creative participation and the way Christians' neurological differences become entangled with violence. Autistic reactions themselves were never uniform, which is precisely why the film cannot be declared simply authentic or offensive. Representation is not an equation with one correct answer. Awards bodies did not transform that conversation into major prestige recognition. The film received no Academy Award or Golden Globe nominations, although it earned genre and international notices, including a Saturn Award nomination for Best Thriller Film. Seth Lee's portrayal of young Christian also received Youth Award recognition. That modest award's footprint reflects the film's cultural position. It was too pulpy for prestige drama, too emotionally peculiar for disposable action, and too divisive in its representation to become an easy symbol of progress. It lived between categories, exactly like its protagonist. Time has been kinder than the initial critical average. Home viewing allowed audiences to revisit the planted clues, appreciate Affleck's tiny behavioral choices, and overlook the structural congestion that feels more exhausting during a single theatrical sitting. The film became less a failed prestige thriller than a beloved character vehicle with an overstuffed first adventure. The release of The Accountant 2 in 2025 made that reevaluation tangible. Christian Wolff had survived almost a decade because viewers wanted him back. Critical approval may measure immediate execution, but longevity measures attachment. The Accountant earned attachment. The final question is why, and the answer lies in its deeper themes of order, punishment, family, and the desperate human need to make an unbalanced world come out even.